Before we start, a quick note about what this channel is and what it isn't. This isn't a recap channel, and it's not a highlight reel. We're here for the parts of Panem that happen after the cameras turn away, the systems behind the games, the contracts hidden inside victory, the lives that keep unfolding long after the anthem ends. Each video on this channel is built to slow things down, to follow the logic the Capitol relies on, the details it hopes you won't connect, and the people who live with the consequences year after year. If that's the kind of Hunger Games analysis you're looking for, you're in the right place. Subscribing just means you'll keep a seat here when we move on to the next story. Now, let's start where Panem always wants you to stop paying attention. Nightlock berries rest in Katniss Everdeen's palm. 2 purple dots against a blood-soaked arena. You know what happens next. The countdown. The threat of a double suicide. The panicked voice in the sky reversing the rules at the last possible second. But here's the real question. Is this the exact moment President Snow understands the games have failed? Or did he already know his masterpiece was cracking long before those berries touched her hand? At face value, the Nightlock stunt is the origin story we're given. The spark, the scene the Capitol will replay in slow motion while they pretend it was all just heightened drama. One victor becomes 2, and suddenly, Panem has a love story instead of a martyrdom. But if you pull back for a second, the more interesting question isn't when the rebellion starts, it's when Snow personally realizes that the games, his favorite weapon, have stopped doing what they were designed to do. The games are supposed to be a promise carved into the calendar. The Capitol always wins. The districts always lose. 1 victor, 23 bodies, and a yearly reminder that resistance is pointless. Fear is the whole point. So what does it mean when, in front of the entire nation, the Capitol has to break its own most sacred rule just to keep 2 teenagers from outsmarting their show? That part matters because this broadcast doesn't just bend the rules, it exposes the relationship between power and performance. The arena is supposed to prove control, not test it. Yet with the berries, you watch the mask slip. For a few seconds, Snow's entire system is held hostage by a girl from District 12 holding poison in her fist. The games promise order, but this ending screams compromise. And compromise is dangerous in a system built on absolutes. So, did Snow only feel the ground shift when he heard Claudius Templesmith stutter out that there could be 2 victors? Or were there earlier warning signs he tried to ignore? Rue's body covered in flowers instead of left as a prop. The 3-finger salute that spreads through District 11. The riot that explodes the second the cameras are supposed to cut away. How many of those moments did he write off as anomalies, glitches in an otherwise perfect design? Because we're going to cover more than just the arena ending. This is where we talk about the slow-motion autopsy of the games themselves. The way the Victor's Tour turns into a threat instead of a celebration. The quarter quell twist that shatters the illusion of safety for every previous victor. And the moment fear in the districts quietly mutates into something Snow never wanted to see on screen. Hope. In this video, we're going to rewind from the berries and track each fracture in Snow's control, scene by scene, until we can pinpoint the exact moment he stops believing in his own weapon and realizes the games are no longer saving the Capitol. They're dooming it. From terror to tradition, why the games had to work. Or everything broke. So if the games are dooming the Capitol, we have to ask, what were they supposed to be doing in the first place? Back in the early years after the Dark Days, The Hunger Games weren't sleek reality TV. They were a public execution with bad lighting. Arenas were bare, cameras clunky, and the districts weren't tuning in so much as being forced to watch their children die on grainy screens. You didn't get Caesar Flickerman and themed interviews. You got raw punishment. Districts were still openly traumatized. The rebellion was a memory, not a history lesson. So the first games didn't need to be clever. They just needed to be loud, bloody, obvious. The message was simple. You rose up, we won, and now every year you pay in children. But jump forward to the 74th. Now the games look almost seasonal. You know when the reaping happens. You know when the victor's tour will roll through. Students probably write essays about favorite victors. The entire thing has hardened into ritual, a grim holiday the country has learned to live around. So why the shift from improvised terror to polished tradition? Why bother with chariots, stylists, and elaborate arenas? Why not just mass execute suspected rebels in a basement and be done with it? Here's the real question. Why turn punishment into a televised event at all? Why give victors money, a house, a personal stylist, and a lifetime of capital attention instead of killing them too and erasing the threat? At face value, victory looks like an escape hatch. One name survives, the rest die, and the winner gets everything their district doesn't. But that part matters because victory is not the end of the games. It's the beginning of a lifelong sentence. Your body, your trauma, your romance, your children if you have them, every part of you is folded back into the system as advertising. You become the walking poster that says, the games are real, the terror is real, but so is the reward. Snow needs that relationship between fear and promise. You see it in the victor's village, in the tours, in the way a victor is paraded through districts that are still in mourning. One person eating capital food in front of starving crowds. One mansion lit up above a coal town. This is where we talk about the larger architecture. The games are just one pillar. You have peacekeepers in the streets, propaganda on the air, the victory tour stitching the narrative together once a year. When one pillar wobbles, the whole structure starts to shake. If the games stop feeling inevitable, peacekeepers start to look beatable. If victors stop looking rewarded, propaganda starts to sound hollow. And this is Snow's real nightmare. Not open rebellion, he thinks he knows how to shoot that. His nightmare is the moment the games stop convincing people that resistance is pointless and start convincing them that the capital can be outplayed. The question is, when does that moment actually hit the screen? We're going to cover the first tiny fracture next, Snow's masterpiece, how the Hunger Games were supposed to work. So to understand that fracture, we have to understand the thing Snow thought could never break. The Hunger Games aren't random cruelty. They're engineered. In Snow's head, they're a three-pillar masterpiece: fear, ritual, reward. If you pull any one of those out, the whole structure wobbles. Keep them balanced, and you don't just rule Panem. You make rebellion feel mathematically impossible. Start with fear. The reaping is the purest version of it. Every year, every district, every child stands there knowing the odds might finally land on them. Not metaphorical death, statistical death. The capital's message is simple. We can reach into your family at any moment. That part matters because it's not just about the arena, it's about the certainty that the arena will always be there. Then ritual locks that fear into place. At face value, the games are a holiday, a tradition, a televised event, with an opening ceremony, interviews, a victor's crowning. They happen on schedule, with the same structure, the same anthem, the same promise that there will be one survivor. This is where we talk about normalization. If horror is wrapped in routine, people start planning their lives around it instead of questioning why it exists at all. And finally, reward. The Capitol doesn't just punish, it bribes. Victor's Village, parades, sponsorships, district parties when your tribute wins. The reason this works is that the games start to look aspirational. Maybe you volunteer, maybe you train your child, maybe in a place like District 1, becoming a victor feels less like a death sentence and more like a career path. Hope, but on a leash. Here's the real question. When does this elegant triangle stop holding itself together and start tearing itself apart? Because Snow's system doesn't fail when the arenas get bloodier. It fails when fear, ritual, and reward stop pointing in the same direction. When the reaping terrifies you, but the ritual broadcasts cracks, and the reward suddenly exposes how insecure the Capitol really is. That's the analytical lens we're going to cover in this video. Not just, when did the rebellion start? You can point to District 11's riot after Rue's death and say, there. Instead, we're asking, when did Snow realize the games themselves were backfiring? When did he look at his own design and see that every broadcast was now a potential advertisement for resistance? Because the games promise order, stability, even a twisted sense of fairness. One boy, one girl, clear rules, may the odds be ever in your favor. But the reality we'll track is that over time, the games keep revealing desperate rule changes, uneven punishments, and blatant manipulation. The Capitol keeps insisting the system is neutral while constantly cheating to protect its narrative. And there is a lot to uncover here. We're going to move chronologically, the early, pre-Katniss cracks, the 74th games, and the berries, the 75th quarter quell, turning victors into open symbols of betrayal, and finally the moment the games become so unstable they can't be resurrected at all. So, let's go back to before the girl on fire ever stepped on stage and watch the first hairline fractures form. Our game plan, tracing the cracks in Snow's arena. So if we're tracing those fractures, what's our actual game plan here? Because Snow doesn't wake up one morning, see Katniss on a screen, and suddenly realize the games are failing. The collapse has a timeline, and we're going to cover it step by step so you can see exactly where his control starts to slip. First, we're going back before Katniss, back to Snow's original vision, when the Hunger Games are supposed to be this flawless ritual of fear and spectacle. At face value, it's simple. You reap, you punish, you entertain the Capitol, and every district remembers the dark days were a mistake. But here's the real question. What happens when the ritual starts generating sympathy instead of submission? This is where we talk about the tiny early warning signs. Mentors who drink too much because they can't handle sending kids to die. Districts quietly mourning their tributes as hometown heroes, and Capitol viewers who start having favorite victors rather than just favorite kills. Then we'll jump into the 74th games as the tipping point, because that's where all those hairline cracks line up. Rue's death isn't just a sad moment, it's the first time you see a tribute's funeral staged by another tribute. Katniss's flowers, the salute, District 11's reaction on the screens. Snow can't fully censor that without raising more questions. That part matters, because the games briefly stop being a warning and become awake. We'll break down how the star-crossed lovers storyline gives the capital a romance to swoon over, while the districts see something else entirely, a united front. And then we get to the berries. Two teenagers threatening double suicide forces the capital into a public glitch in the system. Two victors in a game that's built on the rule that there can only ever be one. From there, we move into overcorrection. The 75th quarter quell is Snow's attempt to slam the door shut. You want hope? Fine, he'll re-reap the victors. We're going to cover how using winners as pawns sends a louder message than any propaganda broadcast. Even if you play by every rule, the capital can still drag you back. We'll talk about Joanna, Finnick, Beatty, the way each district suddenly realizes their treasured victors are disposable, and how that turns the arena into open rebellion instead of controlled violence. After that, we'll zoom out for a meta segment. Why did the books show us more riots, more capital reactions, more of Snow's fear, while the films trim or rearrange those beats? There is a lot to uncover here about adaptation as a kind of second arena. We'll compare what's emphasized: Rue's riot, the Mockingjay dress, the rooftop conversations, to see which moments each version quietly marks as the true failure point. And finally, we'll end on a speculative question. Was there any move Snow could have made to salvage his masterpiece? Could he have doubled down on rewards, changed the quell, killed Katniss earlier, or were the games doomed the moment he turned rebellion into a recurring show? By the end, you'll be able to answer whether the arena failed Snow or whether it simply told the truth about the system that built it. Welcome to the arena. Why this channel obsessively picks at Panem. So before we walk Snow into his own arena and replay the failure in slow motion, quick reality check. You're already living in a kind of victor's village. Not the mansion part, the headspace. This channel exists in that weird in-between zone where you've technically won the fandom lottery. You remember tiny details about Tesserae rules or Peter's prosthetic leg, but you're still haunted by the games. We stay there on purpose, curious, analytical, and just a little dramatic about every choice the capital makes, every victor it breaks, and every district it quietly starves. If you somehow landed here because the algorithm tossed you a Hunger Games clip at 2 a.m., or you're in the middle of a full trilogy rewatch, this is where we talk about what's hiding under the surface. We're going to cover the lore, the politics, the psychology, the reason Snow perfumes roses, the reason District 12's village survives the bombing when almost nothing else does, the reason a handful of berries can do more damage than an entire hovercraft. At face value, you could watch these stories as straight recap. Katniss volunteers, Peter bakes, the arena spins, the end. But here's the real question. Why do these tiny, almost throwaway moments keep rewiring the whole country? Why does Rue's funeral flowers scene send District 11 into open riot? Why does a three-finger salute terrify a president who supposedly has absolute control? That part matters, because this channel isn't just retelling what happened, it's about pulling apart Snow's decisions as if they're game design notes. Why build Victor's village as a promise of safety and then destroy that promise with the quarter quell? Why train children to worship victors and then publicly threaten those same victors with another reaping? What does that do to the relationship between hope and fear in every district watching? So if you're into long-form breakdowns of tiny canon details, the spacing of the houses in 12's village, The missing training period in the films, the way the cameras linger on Katniss's hesitation more than her aim. You're in the right arena. You don't have to do anything right now, but if you want more deep dives into Panem's systems, more dissections of victors, districts, and capital culture, you can always stick around, hit subscribe, and join the people who think Fun Weekend means arguing about quill wording. Because from here on, we're treating the rest of this video as a guided tour. We're going to walk through the early games, the berry stunt, the quarter quell, and the bombed-out remains of 12's village, as one continuous story, the slow, inevitable moment when Snow's favourite institution stopped working, when the arena stopped scaring people and started telling the truth. Before the Girl on Fire, Snow's original vision for the games. So to understand that slow failure, we have to rewind. Back before the Girl on Fire, back to when the games weren't a cracked system Snow was desperately patching, but his proudest proof that the capital had won the dark days forever. Because originally, the Hunger Games weren't a show. They were a clause in a peace treaty. After the district's rebellion, the capital doesn't just demand surrender, it writes revenge into law. Every year, each district must send up children to die as payment. At face value, that's simple punishment. You rebelled. You pay. But here's the real question. How do you turn a one-time victory into a permanent relationship of fear? This is where we talk about early Panem. The first games are crude, held in a ruined sports arena, barely any technology, almost no audience engagement. The capital watches because they're told to, the districts watch because they're forced to. It's public execution with a countdown. Brutal, but unstable. There is a lot to uncover here, because you can't run a society on raw terror forever without it burning out or burning down. Enter young Coriolanus Snow. In the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, he's not yet the snake in the roses. He's a poor capital student obsessed with order, image, and survival. His school assignment: help make the games more watchable. That part matters because it tells you his core belief. The games don't just need to kill, they need to mean something. They need rules, narrative, and a promise. So we're going to cover what he actually adds. Sponsors, interviews, stylists. The idea that a tribute can be interesting, charming, worthy of gifts. Suddenly the arena isn't just a graveyard, it's a stage. For the capital, that's spectacle and moral justification in one. You're not just watching kids die, you're watching heroes fight. Criminal districts pay their debt, and your favourite tribute win glory and luxury. But the games always have two audiences. The capital needs entertainment and reassurance that their power is righteous. The districts need something else. Terror, yes, but also a sliver of possible reward. A victor means food, celebrations, maybe a new house on a hill. Why hate the system outright when it might choose your child to be the lucky exception? Snow's genius is convincing himself he's balanced those needs perfectly. One rule, one victor, one yearly ritual that reminds everyone who won the war, wrapped in enough structure and predictability that people can plan around it, bet on it, emotionally invest in it. The reaping is horrifying, but it's scheduled. The train always comes. The anthem always plays. And that stability is the trap. Because once something becomes tradition, people start reading into it. They compare games, they remember victors, they form favorites, they develop expectations about fairness and narrative payoff. Snow believes he has perfected the formula, but he's also taught Panem to watch closely, to care deeply, and to look for patterns, which means the moment the games break their own rules or produce the wrong kind of story, everyone will notice. The system won't just scare them anymore. It'll start to talk back. And that's exactly where Katniss walks in. Tiny rebellions on live TV. Early warning signs Snow ignored. And that's exactly where Katniss walks in. But here's the real question. Do you really get a girl on fire moment if the fire hasn't already been quietly smouldering for years? The games don't jump from perfect control to nightlock berries overnight. They erode, slowly, publicly, on live TV. Back then, right after the Dark Days, the Hunger Games are raw punishment. Every reaping is a fresh wound. Every arena is a reminder that the Capitol can take your children and make you watch. But fast forward 70 years of the same ritual, the same anthem, the same promise that there will be one victor and 23 bodies. So why the change in how people feel? Because terror, repeated enough, stops being sharp. It becomes. This is where we talk about ritual. Kids in the district start playing Hunger Games in the streets, doing fake reaping scenes, pretending to be careers. Adults run betting pools on who dies first. The games turn into a season on the calendar. At face value, that looks like the Capitol winning. The horror has been normalized. But that part matters because ritual also creates distance. When something is annual, you start comparing seasons, ranking arenas, picking favorites. You're not just afraid anymore. You're invested. And under that glossy investment, tiny rebellions slip through. We're going to cover the big canon moments later, but imagine the ones we never see. A tribute from some outlying district who refuses to cry on cue in Caesar Flickerman's chair. An interview where a kid won't spin or flirt, just stands there in dead silence until the producers cut away. A reaping where the crowd doesn't gasp or wail, they just stare, stone-faced, forcing peacekeepers to drag applause out of them with the butt of a gun. Snow's response: more peacekeepers in the square, harsher punishments for disruption. Maybe a quiet execution no one talks about. The official record shows order restored, but the relationship between capital and district has shifted a millimeter. People aren't cooperating emotionally, they're complying mechanically, and that is much harder to weaponize. Meanwhile, in the capital, something even more dangerous is happening. Citizens stop talking about the games as a moral lesson and start talking about tributes as people. They obsess over Rue's innocence, Finnick's charm, Johanna's rage. Fashion trends copy Katniss's braid before they copy any Capitol soldier's uniform. The narrative focus moves from the Capitol's power to the tribute's personalities. On paper, that looks great for Snow. Ratings are up, merchandising is easy, audiences cry when a victor wins, then immediately tune in for the victory tour. From a political operator's perspective, those numbers say the system is healthy, any awkward silence in a district square, manageable. Any tribute who resists the script, edit around them. But here's the real question. What happens when your audience cares more about the people you're torturing than the message you're sending? When fear turns into fandom, the games stop being a sermon and start being a story. And once it's a story, people start rooting for the plot to twist. So if the games are slowly drifting from punishment toward entertainment, what happens the first time the entertainment points away from capital power instead of toward it? The answer is coming, and it walks into the arena with a bow, a braid, and a berry. The berry system. How the games keep people watching and obeying. The bow, the braid, the berry. Those are the images everyone remembers. But the system that made those berries dangerous, that started years earlier, every single time a name got pulled from a glass bowl. The reaping is the game's hard reset. Once a year, the capital walks into your district square and reminds you that probability is a weapon. It doesn't matter if you kept your head down, if you followed every rule. Your child's name can still come up. Your name can still come up. That part matters because fear has to feel random to feel inescapable. And here's the real question. What do you do with that much raw fear? You can't just leave people staring into the void all year. They'd either shut down or explode. So the games turn terror into ritual. We're going to cover tributes, training, interviews, the arena, but notice how each stage gives everyone, capital and districts, a script. You cheer at the parade, you rank the training scores, you cry at the anthem, you argue about sponsors instead of asking why children are dying on television. At face value, it looks organized, almost professional. There's a schedule, stylists, mentors, commentators. Underneath, it's a pressure valve. The ritual tells you when to be horrified, when to be hopeful, when to mourn. You don't have to think about the injustice, because the show tells you how to feel about it. Then comes the berry system's other half. Reward, Victor's Village, the feast days, the extra grain for a winning district. That's the promise. Survive the arena, play your role, and you never face the reaping again. Your family eats, your district parties, the capital adores you. The relationship between violence and reward becomes the real curriculum. Don't fight the games, win them. Why train rebels when you can train tributes? That's Snow's favorite equation. The wealth of a victor in a place where most people starve is proof that submission can pay off. Districts start pouring their best bodies and sharpest minds into the arena pipeline. Stronger tributes, not stronger resistance cells. This is where we talk about volunteering and career culture. In Snow's ideal world, ambitious kids from the richer districts are begging to enter. They study past games the way you'd study for an exam. They treat the arena as a stage, not a prison. Every volunteer is a potential revolutionary who chose performance over insurrection. But here's the real question. What assumption is all of this built on? Simple, that tributes will stay inside the story. They'll fight, they'll die, they'll win, all according to the rules. Even the rebels are supposed to be contained rebellions, dramatic speeches in interviews, noble sacrifices in the arena, nothing that forces the capital to break its own narrative. The moment someone uses the script against the capital, the whole berry system starts to rot. And when two tributes threaten to give the games an ending with no victor at all, Snow has to decide, protect the rules or protect the illusion. His choice is the crack we're heading toward. Rue's Flowers and District 11, the first time the audience misbehaved. His choice is the crack we're heading toward, because before the berries, there's a smaller, quieter moment where the games slip out of his hands. A girl, a song, and some flowers. On paper, nothing. In practice, the first time the arena stops being a weapon and starts becoming a funeral. This is where we talk about Rue. From Katniss's perspective, that scene should have been routine capital content. A competitor falls, the cameras zoom in, the cannon fires, and the audience moves on to the next kill. That's the promise of the games. brutality with commercial breaks. Instead, Katniss does something incredibly off-script. She holds Rue's hand, she sings to her as she dies, and then she decorates her body with flowers, arranging them carefully so the cameras have to show a child's corpse treated as sacred, not disposable. At face value, it's just grief, a tribute mourning a friend. But here's the real question. What does that look like when it's broadcast to an entire country trained to see tributes as pieces on a board? Katniss isn't just being kind. She's committing a tiny act of narrative treason. She refuses the role of ruthless player and insists on being a human in a place designed to erase humanity. Snow's problem is technical and psychological at the same time. He can't cut the feed entirely without raising questions in the Capitol. Why did the cameras suddenly look away from such a poignant moment? Why is the girl from District 12 crying over a non-career tribute? But if he lets it play, every district sees a tribute honoring another as a person, not a rival. The relationship between audience and arena shifts. The games stop being a distant show and start to feel personal. And then District 11 answers. In the book, it's the bread. A whole district pooling its meager resources to send Katniss a gift mid-games, a silent thank you for how she treated their girl. In the film, it's even louder. The salute, the crowd raising 3 fingers, the riot that explodes almost instantly. Either way, the pattern breaks. Instead of paralyzing fear, you get immediate, collective defiance. That part matters because this is the first time Snow sees the feedback loop misfire in real time. The arena is supposed to punish rebellion, not generate it. Yet Rue's death doesn't just scare District 11, it radicalizes them. The games accidentally create a martyr live on camera. We're going to cover bigger explosions later, the Cortiquel, the arena literally collapsing. But this is the prototype. A single scene proves the risk. If tributes start making meaning out of the violence, symbols out of the dead, Snow can't control what the audience feels anymore. And if he's paying attention, Rue's flowers are the moment he realizes the arena's walls are intact, but the emotional perimeter is breached. The question now is how he tries to patch it, and how every fix only makes the crack wider. The star-crossed glitch. When love stories beat the Capitol's script, so once Rue's flowers crack the emotional perimeter, the Capitol has a problem it can't solve with more mutts or better hovercrafts. Because suddenly, the audience isn't just watching deaths, they're watching relationships. Katniss and Peter start as exactly what Snow wants, anonymous tributes from a forgettable district. At face value, they're there to remind everyone in 12 that the games own your children. But the second Peter drops that rooftop confession and Caesar Flickerman's eyes light up, you feel the narrative tilt. We're going to cover blood, strategy, survival, but the show starts talking about a love story. And that part matters because the Capitol eats it up. Sponsors don't send medicine to District 12's female tribute. They send it to the girl who might be in love. Viewers aren't rooting for a clean execution of punishment. They're rooting for a kiss in a cave. The more Caesar hypes star-crossed lovers, the less anyone remembers this was supposed to be a solemn reminder of the dark days. The games stop feeling like a warning and start feeling like a drama. Here's the real question. Why does Snow let that happen? On paper, he shouldn't. But he's stuck in a ratings trap. If he shuts down the romance, he risks exposing the machinery, reminding the Capitol that this is propaganda, not entertainment. If he leans in, the show is a hit. The districts see that even in the arena, there's room for tenderness, sacrifice, maybe even hope. The very thing that boosts his viewership softens the terror he's selling. This is where we talk about Haymitch, because he sees the glitch immediately and turns it into a weapon. He tells Katniss, play up the romance. Every kiss is a negotiation. Every whispered promise to stay together is a direct line to another parachute. Haymitch is using the Capitol's own story instincts, their hunger for a satisfying relationship arc, to bend the rules. You want a double meal. Act more in love. You want both tributes to live through the feast. Make the audience believe they can't stand to be apart. Katniss joins in, even if she doesn't fully grasp the scale. She exaggerates her feelings, clings to Peter, sells the narrative that their bond is more powerful than the arena. Ironically, the more she fakes it, the more real agency she gains. The emotional center of the games slides off Snow's carefully constructed power fantasy and lands on two teenagers improvising their way through a script they didn't write. Most Capitol viewers don't consciously clock this shift. They still cheer the anthem, still toast the victor. But something fundamental has changed. They're now more invested in whether Katniss and Peter get a happy ending than whether the districts get a brutal lesson. So where does that leave Snow? Does he still believe he can yank the story back on track with a cruel twist? One victor, one corpse, order restored? Or does he already sense a deeper danger that if he denies this love story its conclusion, his own audience might turn on him? Because the moment those berries appear, he has to choose which script to betray. The Nightlock Ultimatum, the rule that could never be broken. Because the moment those berries appear, he has to choose which script to betray. On paper, there isn't supposed to be a choice at all. The games have one sacred rule, the spine that holds the entire ritual together. There must be a victor, one winner, many losers. That's the entire point. The Capitol decides whose name gets pulled, whose body gets paraded, whose death gets televised, and whose survival proves the Capitol's promise that obedience might, maybe, be rewarded. At face value, that sounds simple. Someone always crawls out of the arena. But here's the real question. What happens if no one does? What happens if the tributes decide the only winning move is to deny the Capitol its ending? This is where we talk about the berries as a design failure, not just a romantic gesture. You're in the final minutes of the 74th games. The mutant mutts are gone. Cato is dead. The arena has done its job. Katniss and Peter are standing there as the last two tributes, and the emergency rule change that allowed two victors from the same district has just been revoked on live television. The system expects them to turn on each other. That's the script. One kills the other, the cannon fires, the anthem plays, and the Capitol gets its neat, brutal resolution. Instead, Katniss reaches for the Nightlock. Two handfuls, two tributes, one shared decision to die together rather than give the show the ending it wants. We're going to cover why that's more than a stunt. In that instant, the games are facing an impossible equation. If both tributes die, the core rule shatters. No victor, no proof of Capitol mercy, no annual promise that someone can survive by playing along. But if the game makers cave and let them both live, they've also broken the rule, just in a different direction, and they've done it in front of every district and every Capitol citizen. That part matters because the compromise isn't whispered backstage, it's screamed through the sky. The frantic reversal, the announcement that both can win, is a public admission that the arena can be blackmailed. Snow's fury afterward isn't just about being defied, it's about being forced to negotiate with his own victims on camera. And once you've seen that, you can't unsee it. If tributes can threaten double suicide and make the Capitol blink, then for a few seconds, the power relationship flips. The games stop looking inevitable and start looking negotiable. There is a lot to uncover here in terms of why that terrifies Snow more than any riot. So is this the moment he realizes the games are failing? Or is it the moment he decides the fix is not less cruelty, but more? An even harsher reminder in the Quarter Quell that the promise of a victor was never real hope at all. Hope on tour. How the Victor's Tour shows Snow the fire spreading. So when Snow sends Katniss and Peter on the Victor's Tour, he isn't just giving them a vacation, he's running a system check. Are the games still working? Or did those berries install a virus he can't uninstall without crushing the whole program? At face value, the tour is simple. Every year, the new victor does a victory lap through all 12 districts. Ending in the capital, you stand on platforms, you give pre-written speeches, you stare at the families of the kids you killed while the capital calls it a celebration. The official promise is, look what the games can do for you. One lucky tribute gets food, fame, and a house. The rest get closure wrapped in capital-approved grief. But here's the real question. Why does Snow keep reopening those wounds every single year instead of letting them scar over? The reason is cruel and efficient. The tour reasserts the relationship between Victor, District, and Capital. It parades the generosity of the system while forcing everyone to relive their loss under Capital cameras, reminding them that even their mourning belongs to Snow. This is where we talk about how Katniss and Peter break that script almost immediately. Their speeches are supposed to be bland gratitude. Instead, you feel the tension in every square. Katniss is choking on the lies Snow forced her to promise. Peter is improvising humanity into lines that were meant to be propaganda, and the crowds are not reacting the way a stable regime needs them to. You can sense it. The games didn't end in the arena. They followed her home. District 11 becomes the barometer. It's Rue's home, Thresh's home, and the capital expects quiet, contained. Katniss apologizes, offers part of her earnings, and then it happens. The old man's three-finger salute, the whistled tune, the crowd answering back. That's not just grief. That's open, coordinated defiance in front of peacekeepers and cameras. Pattern interrupt. The tour is supposed to shut districts up, not make them stand up. Snow watches the crackdown that follows. The shot, the chaos, and he doesn't see order being restored. He sees proof that the games are now generating unrest faster than his peacekeepers can suppress it. That part matters because District 11 is agricultural, essential, and already punished harshly after Rue's death. If they're willing to risk public execution just to salute a girl from another district, the fear calculus is changing. So Snow reaches for his other weapon, narrative. We're going to cover how much he leans on spin here. Caesar Flickerman's interviews, glossy recapped footage, the star-crossed lovers' engagement, the pregnancy story later on. These are all attempts to drag the berries back into a love story instead of a political statement. Notice how often Snow tries to talk rather than shoot his way out of this. By the end of the tour, he can't pretend the Nightlock stunt was a one-off glitch. He's seen the emotional fallout in real time. Stiff crowds, dangerous silences, spontaneous salutes. The games were designed to stabilizing it on camera, and Snow understands something he'll overcompensate for in the Quarter Quell. Once Hope starts touring with the victor, the arena isn't the only place the games can explode. Why not just kill her? The meta question that exposes the system. So once Snow sees that Hope is now touring with the victor, you hit the obvious wall. If Katniss is that dangerous, why not just kill her? Why not arrange a train accident, a hunting mishap in the woods, some quiet capital heart failure, and be done with it? At face value, that sounds efficient. One girl, one problem, one solution. But here's the real question. What kind of system has Snow actually built? And what does that system allow him to do without breaking its own spell? Because the Hunger Games are not just a punishment. They're a public ritual with rules everyone in every district can recite by heart. That part matters because once you ritualize death, you accidentally put limits on it. Snow's whole relationship with power is theatrical. Every reaping is televised. Every cannon, every parachute, every victor's train ride into the capital is part of a script. The games promise a twisted sort of fairness. 2 names are drawn, 24 enter. 1 comes out. The arena is cruel, but the rules are legible. People understand why they're dying, or at least they think they do. Now compare that to a different kind of regime. Imagine a Panem with no arena at all, no parades, no interviews, just secret police and disappearances in the night. In that world, no one expects reasons. You step out of line, you vanish. There is nothing to broadcast, nothing to misinterpret, no spectacle for the capital to lose control of, because there was never a promise of rules in the first place. Snow didn't choose that model. He chose the games. He chose a system where terror has a schedule and a set design. And once you do that, you can't casually have your most famous victor trip on some stairs and crack her skull. Everyone in District 12 has seen Katniss on their screens. Everyone in the capital knows she survived mutts, fire, and career tributes. A random offstage death would feel wrong in a way the regime can't easily explain. We're going to cover why that wrongness is so dangerous. It's not just that people would be sad, it's that they would start asking the one question Snow cannot afford. If the rules don't protect the Mockingjay, do they protect anyone? The illusion of structure is what keeps capital citizens comfortable enough to sip their drinks and cheer. They can enjoy the violence because, supposedly, it follows rules. This is where we talk about why Snow keeps dragging Katniss back into the arena instead of a back alley. He's trying to fold her into the ritual that's already accepted as legitimate. If she dies, it has to be inside the games, inside the story, so the system looks consistent. Killing her offstage would admit the games are just a mask, and once you rip the mask, pure fear has to do all the work. And Snow knows something terrifying about pure fear. It's not the strongest thing in Panem. To see why he can't lean on terror alone, we have to talk about the one force he's been trying to ration from the very beginning: hope. Hope, carefully controlled, Snow's favorite poison turns on him. Snow actually tells you his entire strategy in one sentence. Hope, it is the only thing stronger than fear. A little hope is effective. A lot of hope is dangerous. At face value, that scene with Seneca Crane in the Rose Garden sounds almost philosophical. Here's the real question. What does it mean when your head of state talks about hope like it's a controlled substance? This is where we talk about the games as a delivery system. Snow doesn't want Panem drowning in despair. Pure terror burns out. people snap, and then you get the dark days all over again. So he designs an annual ritual that bakes in just enough hope to keep everyone walking voluntarily to the slaughter. One name in thousands, one victor per district maybe, someday, one ticket out. That part matters because the games promise something very specific. If you obey, if you play by capital rules, there is a microscopic chance you will be rewarded beyond your wildest dreams. Mansion, money, your family fed, your district showered in grain. You can see the relationship to Victor's village here. It's the architectural proof that Snow's promise might be real. So why not just do public executions? Why spend so much on arenas, stylists, parades? Straight up firing squads are cheaper and send a very clear message. But executions don't offer choice. They don't let a district tell itself, if our tribute trains harder, if we volunteer, maybe we win. Mass death with no lottery creates martyrs. The games create gamblers. And then Katniss shows up and starts messing with the odds. Rue's death should have been just another tragic loss in a long list. Instead, Katniss covers her in flowers. She turns a disposable child into a sacred image, and, crucially, the cameras keep rolling. District 11 doesn't see fear, they see respect, grief, and a stranger honoring one of their own. Hope shifts. It's no longer about winning, it's about being seen. From there, the containment cracks, the three-finger salute, the silent defiance, the way people in the districts start copying that gesture on victor tours. None of that is tied to becoming a victor. It's tied to resisting the games themselves. We're going to cover how those tours weaponize visibility later. But notice the pattern. Snow's carefully rationed hope starts leaking out of the arena and into the streets. Then come the berries. The entire system rests on one non-negotiable rule. There must be a single victor. When Katniss and Peter threaten double suicide, they force the capital into a public choice. Either let them die and destroy the illusion that the games are fair, or bend the rules and admit the players can push back. Snow chooses survival of the broadcast, and in doing so, he broadcasts something worse. Hope is now bigger than his arena. The moment he realizes the games are failing isn't when the Quell Arena explodes. It's earlier, in those broadcasts where people are cheering for rebellion instead of ratings. Everything he does after, the crackdown, the Quell twist, the bombing of District 12, is a frantic attempt to shove that escaped hope back into its cage. And it's already gone. So what do you do when your favorite weapon starts aiming itself at you? The Quell trap. When Snow weaponizes the victors, so what do you do when your favorite weapon starts aiming itself at you? If you're Snow, you don't put it down. You double down, you sharpen it on the very people it was supposed to reward. This is where we talk about the third quarter Quell rule change. At face value, it sounds ceremonial. Every 25 years, a special games, a new twist pulled from some dusty envelope. But here's the real question. Why does this particular twist say, from now on, your tributes will be reaped from the existing pool of victors? Up to this point, the relationship between the capital and its victors runs on a very specific promise. Survive the arena and you never go back. You get the mansion, the steady food, the status. Your district gets celebrations and extra grain. The whole system of Victor's Village is built on that idea of permanent safety. So when Snow announces that the 75th Games will use only victors, He's not just changing a rule, he's publicly betraying the core deal the games are built on. Why break that now? Why take the one group that proves the system works and throw them back in? Snow's mindset has shifted. After the berries, after Rue's funeral flowers and the salute from District 11, he no longer sees the games themselves as the main problem. He sees the victors as the problem, especially Katniss. In his head, if he can re-sacrifice the symbols, he can decapitate the rebellion. No Mockingjay, no movement. That part matters because it shows how scared he is. The Quell twist is Snow admitting, in front of all of Panem, that hope is now concentrated in the people he once used as advertisements. The Capitol can't just mentor them, threaten them, or parade them. It has to kill them again. And in doing that, he shatters the illusion of fairness. If even a victor can be reaped, what was the point of volunteering? Why chase a reward that can vanish the second the Capitol feels nervous? Every district child watching that announcement learns the same lesson. The games were never a contract. They were a trap. Here's the irony. By trying to isolate Katniss, Snow accidentally creates the most dangerous arena in history. He concentrates talent, trauma, and resentment in one place. Finnick, Beatty, Johanna, YRS, Mags. These are not terrified first-timers. They're professionals who know the system's weak points. We're going to cover the mechanics of the arena sabotage later, but the key reason it works is simple. Snow gathered his enemies for them. So when he opens that envelope and announces the twist, he's doing more than setting up a bloodbath. He's telling every viewer that the games are no longer a stable tradition. They're a desperate weapon he's willing to break his own rules to use. And once you see the rules can be broken from the top, what stops you from breaking them from below? The answer to that question is waiting in the arena itself, in a clockwork jungle that was never meant to survive the victors trapped inside it. When the arena explodes, losing the only story that held Panem together. The arena was supposed to fix everything. Snow's answer to the crumbling illusion of the games is this clockwork jungle, a weaponized terrarium built to prove he still controls every variable. You don't just have trees and mutts anymore, you have a giant clock face of horrors. Hourly blood rain, jabberjays that weaponize memory, a spinning cornucopia that scrambles alliances on command. At face value, it's brilliant game design. But here's the real question. Why does a system that claims to be stable need an arena this paranoid? This is where we talk about control dressed up as creativity. The third quarter Quell is rigged in concept and in architecture. The victors are chosen from an existing pool Snow already understands. Their traumas are mapped, their relationships are predictable. The arena is segmented so the game makers can herd people into specific slices of terror, forcing confrontations or separations on cue. The promise is simple. Katniss will break on camera and the Capitol will watch the Mockingjay die in glorious high definition. But there is a lot to uncover here because the arena only works as a symbol if everyone inside is actually playing Snow's game. Plutarch Heavensby is supposed to be the loyal head game maker, the man turning the clock. Instead, he and the rebels start turning the arena itself into a bomb. Every alliance you see forming around Katniss, Beatty, Finnick, Johanna isn't just about survival. It's coordinated protection. They're bodyguards pretending to be competitors. Then comes the pattern interrupt, the force field. Earlier, that invisible wall is just another flex of Capitol technology, throwing Peter back. and nearly killing him. It's there to remind you the real enemy is the dome itself. But Beatty's plan to wire the lightning tree to the force field flips the meaning. The same barrier that keeps tributes trapped becomes the weak point in Snow's entire narrative machine. When Katniss fires that arrow and the sky fractures, you're not just watching an arena explode, you're watching the sacred space of the games, this supposedly untouchable laboratory of power, literally shatter on live broadcast. The cameras catch the dome cracking, the jungle glitching, the image of control breaking into static. That part matters because the arena has always been the Capitol's church. It's where they preach their one true doctrine. We decide who lives and who dies. So what happens when the altar blows up mid-sermon? Snow's new problem is that the games don't end. There's no victor crowned, no anthem, no neat death recap to close the story. Instead, there's chaos. Tributes vanish into the sky. Katniss disappears. The screen goes black. Both the Capitol and the districts are left with the same forbidden question: what just happened, and who's really in control now? From this point on, the games stop functioning as a ritual of stability and become an active battlefield. Snow can't plausibly sell them as tradition anymore. He's lost the only story that ever held Panem together, and the next time cameras turn back on, they won't belong to him alone. Capital fandom versus capital fear, when the audience stops playing along. And here's where the real fracture shows up. Not in the arena, but on the couches in the Capitol. For decades, the Hunger Games are the Capitol's favorite escape room. You dress up, you bet on tributes, you cry at the right moments, and then you go home to your pastries and genetically engineered pets. At face value, it's cruel, sure, but it's curated cruelty. The relationship is safe because the pain is distant and the narrative is simple. They suffer, you feel glamorous for watching. So why does Katniss ruin that? Why do two teenagers with zero media training become a problem the Capitol can't just edit around? This is where we talk about the 74th Games as a romance the audience didn't realize was a rebellion. Capitol viewers project onto Katniss and Peter the way they always have with tributes, but the star-crossed lovers' twist pulls them in deeper. Suddenly, you're not just watching a spectacle, you're rooting for a promise. That part matters because once you hope both of them live, the core rule of the games becomes emotionally inconvenient. One victor, one neat ending, no messy feelings. When the Nightlock berries come out, the Capitol is trapped by its own marketing. Do you let them both die and risk losing your favorite show, or cave publicly and admit the games can be negotiated? Snow chooses survival of the broadcast. The audience gets its double victor, and quietly, the meaning of the games always win cracks for everyone. Back in the districts, that crack isn't quiet at all. District 11's salute for Rue, the uprisings we're going to cover in other sections, the Mockingjay pin turning into a banned symbol. Those aren't isolated fan reactions, they're test signals. The games stop being just a punishment and start functioning as a live feed of district anger. The same cameras that sell Capitol fashion are now documenting the origin story of a war. By the time we hit the Quarter Quell, Capitol citizens aren't just entertained, they're anxious. Why are beloved victors being sent back in? Why is their supposed reward revoked? The fear shifts from what if my child is reaped to what if the system I trusted is lying to me. There is a lot to uncover here, but the short version is Snow weaponizes the victors one more time and accidentally proves no one is safe, not even the people the capital adores. Meanwhile, the districts read the same twist as confirmation. Winning never meant safety. The arena in the 75th isn't just a jungle. It's a battlefield preloaded with symbols. Every alliance, every sabotage, every jab at the force field is rebellion work done on live TV. The capital watches confused. The districts watch coordinated. And here's the real question. What does Snow actually lose first? Territory or story? Once capital viewers stop believing the games are pure entertainment and districts stop believing they're pure fate, his masterpiece can't function. You can rebuild arenas. You can't rebuild belief once both audiences know the games don't mean what you say they mean. The next step isn't fixing the show, it's replacing it, and that's where the rebels are already one season ahead. A what-if autopsy. So if the rebels are one season ahead, here's the real question. Was there ever a version of the show where Snow keeps it on the air? Or, once Katniss pulls out those berries, are the games already a cancelled series walking? This is where we talk about the big what-ifs. If Snow had reacted differently at each pressure point, the berries, Rue's funeral, the Victor's tour, the quarter quell, could he have preserved the games as a functioning system? Or are we just rearranging deck chairs on a very on-fire arena? Start with the harshest option everyone thinks about first. Why didn't he just execute Katniss the second she stepped off the train? At face value, that solves everything. No Mockingjay, no symbol, no problem. But that part matters because Snow's entire strategy is built on hope as a promise. Victors are supposed to be untouchable, proof that the rules are real. Publicly killing a fresh victor for outsmarting the games doesn't restore fear, it shreds the relationship between play by the rules and you might live. Suddenly, every district knows the contract is fake. What about total censorship? Cut Rue's flower-covered body, erase the three-finger salute, never air Peter's real or not real confession, and you keep the games clean, right? The reason that fails is practical. Capital citizens expect raw footage. Districts expect to see their dead. If the edit is too perfect, you raise new questions. Why did the screen cut to static right when District 11 started to riot? Why did the anthem jump? Silence is its own kind of confession. Then there's the nuclear option. Cancel the games for a year, announce heightened security, and roll out open crackdowns instead of ritualized ones. We're going to cover why that's actually worse for Snow. The games are his mask. Without the annual spectacle, every whipping post, every peacekeeper raid is naked power with no story wrapped around it. You don't get distracted by gowns and fire. You just see a gun. So could softer choices have worked? Imagine Snow quietly rigging future games to avoid martyrs. No more sympathetic 12-year-olds. No tributes who can sing to mockingjays or charm interviewers into crying on camera. Or he could have doubled down on the reward side. More district concessions, more food shipments when a victor wins. Genuine safety for victors' families. Maybe even retiring older victors off screen so the promise of escape feels real again. On paper, that sounds smart, but by the time of the berries, there is a lot to uncover here structurally. The contradiction is baked in. The games need terror, but they also need volunteers, stylists, mentors, escorts, an entire apparatus of people who have to agree to show up. The second attribute publicly refuses the premise. We both eat these, or you have no victor. They expose the fact that participation is a choice, not a law of nature. Snow can tweak casting, he can sweeten the prizes, he can repaint Victor's village. What he can't do is unteach Panem that saying no is possible. So was the failure inevitable, or did he just pick the worst answers at every fork? I want you to sit with that, because the next move he makes, the quarter quell twist, is either his boldest save attempt or the final nail in his own show's coffin. The exact moment, pinpointing when Snow realized the games were failing. So when does he know? Not in the abstract, not as a political theory. When does Coriolanus Snow, in his own head, realize the games are slipping out of his control? To answer that, we have to walk back through the warning signs in order, because there is a lot to uncover here. The first crack is small but loud. Rue's flowers and District 11's salute. Katniss turns a dead child into a funeral. The district answers with a 3-finger gesture and a riot, and Snow sees something he never wanted on his broadcast. Grief turning into coordination. At face value, he can still tell himself it's an outlier. Wrong girl, wrong district. Easy to blame the local peacekeepers. Then comes the star-crossed lovers narrative. On paper, it's his fix. You turn Katniss and Peter into a romance, you wrap rebellion in a love story, and you sell it back to the Capitol as ratings. But that part matters because it's the first time the games need a story patch to keep working. The system is no longer self-explanatory, it needs spin. And then the berries. This is where we talk about the first undeniable systemic failure. 2 tributes threaten double suicide, and for a few seconds, there is no rule that covers this. The games promise one victor. The engine literally has no setting for 0. The moment Claudius Templesmith announces the rule reversal, Snow is forced into a public compromise. That's the exact point where the games stop being an unbending ritual and become negotiable in front of the whole country. Here's the real question. Does Snow fully absorb that in the arena, or does it sink in later? I'd argue the berries are the mirror he can't look away from. Proof that his masterpiece now belongs to someone else. Katniss uses his own tool, spectacle, to corner him, but emotionally, the realization finishes cooking on the Victor's tour. On that train, he watches the fallout district by district. District 11's silent fury, the forced speeches, the way every square turns into a referendum on the games instead of a celebration of them. The tour is supposed to reseal the wound, instead it shows him the infection. This is when Snow feels, not just thinks, that the games are destabilizing Panem. Hope is no longer contained to the Capitol, it's leaking outward through every camera shot of the girl on fire. So why the quarter quell twist? That's where he admits the failure through action. Reaping from the existing pool of victors is Snow saying out loud to every district that the old promise is dead. Winning never meant safety. He's trying to put out a fire with gasoline, using the games one more time to solve the problem the games created. The real moment is a short span, from the berries to the end of the tour, where Snow shifts from confident architect to panicked arsonist. After that, every move, including the quell, is damage control. And once the arena itself explodes, we're not talking about a failing show anymore. We're talking about open war. From masterpiece to Molotov, what Snow's failure says about power. Once the arenas turn into battlefields, the games are finished as a product. But they actually died earlier. They died the second the story Snow was selling stopped matching what people saw on screen and in their own districts. That's the core takeaway here. The Hunger Games don't fail because they become too cruel. They fail because they stop being believable. At face value, the Capitol keeps saying, "This is justice, this is order, this is necessary." But you watch Rue's body covered in flowers. You watch two tributes threaten double suicide with Nightlock. You watch victors march back to slaughter, and you feel the contradiction in your gut. Here's the real question. What was Snow really managing all those years? It wasn't just soldiers, peacekeepers, or trains. It was a narrative, a promise that if you obey, if you play your part, the pain will be contained to a yearly ritual, and maybe, just maybe, your district gets a victor and a tiny slice of hope. That part matters because the whole system runs on emotional investment. You have to care who wins. You have to believe the rules mean something. And that's where the franchise's larger thesis clicks in. Any system that leans on spectacle and controlled hope is fragile by design. The very feelings that keep you compliant can flip in a second. You cheer for Katniss as the girl on fire, then suddenly that same fire is aimed at the Capitol. You cry for Rue, and that grief turns into a riot in District 11. The relationship between audience and arena is the real battlefield. Once people realize their tears and cheers are fuel, not just reactions, Snow is a tragic figure because he never really understands that. He thinks rebellion is a virus you can bottle, label the Hunger Games, and administer once a year under supervision. He believes he can script rage, choreograph grief, and monetize trauma. Then one girl treats his script as a suggestion instead of a law. Katniss volunteers, sings to a dying child, buries her in flowers, pulls out the berries, and suddenly every carefully written line he spent decades rehearsing is being improvised over in real time. So here's my question for you. If you had to pick a single moment where Snow realizes the games are failing, where is it? Is it Rue's death and that three-finger salute? The Nightlock berries? The victory tour kiss that doesn't calm the districts down? The Quarter Quell announcement where every victor looks at him with open hatred? Or the arena explosion when his masterpiece literally comes apart on camera? Drop your moment in the comments and tell me why that's the point of no return for him. If you enjoyed this kind of deep dive into Panem's politics and the reasons the Capitol's promises keep collapsing, this is where we talk about more. We're going to cover individual victors, district cultures, and how places like Victor's Village quietly weaponize hope. So if you want to keep exploring how the games work under the surface, make sure you stay tuned and check out the rest of the Victor's Village playlist next.